Hi, I'm Lisa Carlton, the founder of College Matchpoint, and I wanted to talk about a subject that I think is so important, and this is rising seniors who are struggling with mental health issues. We know during the COVID pandemic that many teens became isolated and as a result began to struggle with new mental health or struggle more with existing mental health, whether it was depression, anxiety, or eating disorders, or any other mental health issues. And at the same time, we know now many of these rising seniors are feeling the college process sort of on their heels as though it's coming fast. And yet they're still dealing with these mental health issues. And I want to talk today about some possibilities of ways to handle that. Of course, the first thing we have to think about is a student's health and wellness is the most important thing. So for the student to begin to get to a point where they're working with a therapist or a psychiatrist or both to regain their health, and we know that this sometimes takes time. And so my suggestion is that the first step is you want to get the mental health issue stabilized before you start talking about college, even if that changes your original plans. And the reason this is so critical is launching to college in and of itself is a very big emotional task. And if a student is already depleted from dealing with a mental health issue, that's going to make the transition to college harder than it would have been. And most of us can remember that that transition was difficult by itself. So the first thing is dealing with that mental health issue with a professional. And the second thing is, I know many families worry, what if we're behind? What if we lose a year? What if my student, they had been planning for this all along and they'll be so disappointed? And one of the things I want to remind you of is that while we've all had plans, right, that have had to change during this time, we know that the research bears out that students who enter college in a healthy state are much more likely to have healthy outcomes. And so while that may have been the plan, it may be wise to reconsider that or to look at options. Possibly they were thinking of going really far away from home, but maybe it would be a good idea for them to stay a little closer that first year. That doesn't mean they can't ultimately go away. So there's many options in between, but the critical piece is to make sure that as you consider college, inside of that, you're considering the mental health issue and how those two are going to work together. We know that students typically, when they are struggling with mental health issues, tend to do better if there is a loved one somewhere nearby. The other option that I want to talk a little bit about is while some students are absolutely college capable, they may not be quite ready emotionally right now. And if that's the case, what might you do in order to make that next year something that's exciting and has some growth in it, and at the same time gives the student time to stabilize and get to a place where they're in a more comfortable spot emotionally and will ultimately be able to launch to college? And many times we think of a gap year for that. And I know when people think of gap years, they typically think of students going off to faraway lands and doing some exotic trip. And that's certainly one option. But we have many, many things that students do during gap years. Volunteer for a whole year, volunteer and work, learn a new skill, do some independent research, follow their, if they're a great artist, focus on their art for a year and possibly work. In other words, a combination of many things and many traditional gap year programs, because I do think there's some fantastic programs that help students during this transition time that can also work. But being open to some other possibilities for that year that maybe aren't the full stress of a full load of college, learning to live on one's own and learning to live far away while struggling with serious anxiety or depression can be an option that is really can help the student. And one of the things that I've seen in my practice, I work with a lot of students who have mental health issues and they do very well in college. But one of the things that I have seen is timing does matter. And so when a student goes to college, when they're really not in the emotional space to do that, oftentimes that is not successful for them because their health doesn't allow them to be as successful in college as they might have wanted to be. And the emotional baggage of that is then toppled on top of whatever mental health issue they were dealing with before. So I've been noticing this in my practice. I hear colleagues talking about this, and my background is in mental health, and I really want to share with people that students' health is the number one most important thing, and college is going to be there. But the college process can be extremely stressful. It can bring tension in the family. And so I encourage you, if your student is actively struggling right now, to consider taking a step back and evaluating the original plan that you have and adjusting it so that your student can ultimately have a successful launch to college.